Welcome back to the second hour of our study. This is now Secret of the Christian Spiritual Life, Lesson 32, and it's part B of Spiritual Warfare. I have two different playlists on the internet on YouTube for those who are more interested in the spiritual warfare lessons. They can just go to that playlist. So that's why they have same study, two different names. During the break, I did find the book, Why Christians, let's see, it's too close. I guess I have to, won't focus. I guess maybe that's probably as good as we'll get. Why Christians Can't Trust Psychology. The back is by Ed Bulkley, who's a PhD and has counseling ministry in Denver, or did at the time he wrote the book. He says, some say we need the Bible plus psychology. Others say the Bible alone is sufficient. And I'm one of those that says the Bible is sufficient, but you can utilize these. He does have a lot of insight, and I've used a lot of his information in putting together a presentation. Here are some of the, this I think is DISC, the DIS. Yeah, this is the DISC humoralism version. Hopefully it's showing up. I can't tell. Here, let me change my. See it on the TV screen? Okay. All right. Tim LaHaye probably has half a dozen or more books on the DISC method of evaluating people, and has some interesting charts I probably should have scanned and utilized because they help give us some insight. This one is I think it doesn't have an index. This one by James Mallory is called The Kink and I, where I call them cramps. He says you have a kink in your spiritual life, neurotic twists of truth. And that one doesn't use the DISC method, I don't think. Here's Tim LaHaye specifically for the male. Understanding the male temperament. Does that show up on there? No. No, it's good. Okay, so it's set at a fixed distance toward me, I guess. So there are several of those, all doing why you act the way you do. There's some psychology mixed in with the DISC method. I've studied them all and have probably at least another half a dozen books on those subjects on my bookshelves. But I don't place a lot of credence in them, but they are good to know so you can kind of spot yourself in them and try to deal with yourself. Okay, so let's go ahead and pray and we'll get started with lesson 32 or 11B, depending on which. Father, thank you for this time that we have to study. We ask again as we study human viewpoint descriptions that we understand that there's a spiritual avenue to explore, not just the human viewpoint avenue. And we ask that you give us the descriptors of the human viewpoint as a way to see ourselves in your word so that we might adjust to your doctrine and not to human methods of treating our insufficiencies. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. Yeah, I want to make everybody aware and focus on the slide heading, my caveat, human viewpoint perspectives, descriptive, not prescriptive. All of these that we're going through are in no way an endorsement of a prescription for how to treat yourself, though I'm not going through any prescriptive parts of these things. There are prescriptions in all of these, but I'm not going through them. I'm just giving you the descriptions because they are valuable. Human observation of human behavior is mostly accurate, but treating those human behaviors with human viewpoint is always, well, it's because you weren't potty trained properly, or it's because of the way your mother treated you, or it's because of the way your father treated you, or they use what I call the psychological excuses to make you feel better, so you'll keep paying your money to go see them. You're going to go see the psychologist and keep having your talk sessions. That's why psychologists, when you say, well, I have this deep-seated resentment, they say, you have a deep-seated resentment? You say, yeah, that's what I just said. I said, well, who do you resent? And how do you know it's resentment? And they ask you these questions that you're supposed to be able to think through your own problem. Well, what I found during college, I went to a group therapy session that the professor that taught our psychology 101 class, and I went to that class to observe, and there was no direction ever given, no answers. It was all just talk about it, and I thought, well, this is a waste of time. Thought I might flunk my final because I wrote my term paper on behavioral modification psychological approach, where you actually showed people what they were doing wrong and told them how to fix it. And I thought, oh boy, he's not going to like this, but he did. He accepted it, and I got an A, and so I passed the class without any problems. Okay, we're now on humoralism, better known as the temperaments. And there are 4 temperaments. Seems 4 is a common number for all of these, but humoralism has 4 temperaments. And so we have the phlegmatic, and that's the second. We covered choleric. Now we're covering the phlegmatic, and that's laid back, easygoing. They need structure, they're calm, they're passive, they're team oriented. As opposed to the choleric, right? The choleric is the leader, the driver, the one who's going to get things done. The phlegmatic is the one that's okay with whatever the choleric wants to do. They're laid back, easygoing. They enjoy the structure that the choleric provides. They're team oriented. They're not like the choleric who will take over the team and say, here, I'll do this. I'll bring it back to the next meeting. You all don't have to worry about it. The phlegmatic is, okay, we can live with that. No problem. All right. They're typically introverted. They I understand that the introvert does not necessarily mean that they're unsociable. You'll notice that we never used, when we covered introvert and extrovert from the MBTI, we never said they're unsociable. They're just more internally focused, not as influenced by their external environment. An introvert has an active inner life and can be tired by large amounts of social interaction. They tire out. Now, this is just too much for me. They need quiet and solitude to recharge their batteries. Introverts are often seen as arrogant or snobbish due to their quiet, introspective natures. This is rarely, if ever, true. In the DISC model, the phlegmatic is the S for steady or structure. They like structure. Phlegmatics appear to the world as calm easygoing people. As friends, they are fiercely loyal, though they do not usually have a large number of friends. It takes time to get to know a phlegmatic because they are not naturally outgoing. You have to really work to get to know them. They don't reveal themselves easily, and they're likely to not give you a lot of information that you can determine what they're like. And so a lot of times people don't pursue them as friends. They think that they're arrogant or snobbish, so they don't make the effort to get to know them. But if they do, they'll find out that they're really not snobbish or arrogant. They're just hard to get to know because they are very introverted and very private. Phlegmatics make great team members because they are cooperative and do not insist on their own way. They tend to prefer repetitive, structured work, which also makes them excellent assistants or committee members. The phlegmatic is a calm, easygoing person. He's often slow-moving, does not get ruffled easily. Many of the Latins have a strong phlegmatic streak in them. This is quite typical temperament for Latin Americans. The mañana syndrome. Tomorrow, we get it done tomorrow, okay? The phlegmatic is usually easy to get along with, has many friends, but is sometimes so laid back that he doesn't get around to the things he should do. So they're sometimes thought of as lazy. He will often not volunteer for a leadership role, but if he somehow falls into it, he'll do well because they're usually intelligent and they're usually very, very thoughtful. He is able to make peace between feuding partners, feuding parties. He tends to see the humorous side of human nature, and he may, with his dry humor, poke fun at others in a hilariously funny way. The phlegmatic has two chief weaknesses. First, they have to fight the tendency towards laziness. It's very easy for the phlegmatic to drift when faced with unstructured time. There are people that need to have a daily schedule. The second weakness shared by phlegmatics is a naturally fearful streak. While apparently calm most of the time, the phlegmatic's inside world is awash with anxiety and fear. These fears may be completely unfounded, but still the phlegmatics still find a way to worry. So if you're a worrying kind of person, you may be a phlegmatic. With all this inner stuff going on, the phlegmatic is still hard to read and may be thought of as shy, snobbish, or arrogant, when for the most part, none of these is true. Most extroverts have a great deal of trouble understanding introverts, but have an easier time accepting phlegmatics than they do the more critical, melancholy temperament. Phlegmatics are more easygoing, easy to get along with than the melancholy. The phlegmatic lack the sparkle of the sanguine. They're not cheerful, outgoing, but are also quite adaptable, and it will not be likely to rock the boat, neither through the zeal of the choleric or the melancholic, nor unwittingly as with the sanguine. Frequently, as is the case of the great theologian Aquinas, who is often thought to have been of this temperament, they can be extraordinary scholars, which is why they make good leaders if they're kind of forced into the role, because they're usually quite intelligent and quite analytical. The phlegmatic will have a direct and rather scientific approach. The very lack of passion inherent in the phlegmatic, which can appear to be indifference in relationships with others, will keep their intellectual vision from becoming clouded. They're not passion driven. They're not very passionate people. They're more analytical. The phlegmatic have a degree of detachment that makes for great minds, but does not foster warm relationship. They will be unlikely to offend others and equally unlikely to fall in the trap of judging, but will leave the others with a sense of indifference. Where the sanguine role is with active involvement with others, The phlegmatic is the translator, the writer, or the scientist. Those of phlegmatic temperament are likely to be stabilizing forces in any group situation. They will have a sense of duty and responsibility that will be a strong influence on their actions and decisions. Different though they are from the sanguine, they too need positive influences from the authority figures or groups with which they associate themselves. So they need authority because they're not likely to take independent leadership kind of roles, and they want some direction, but they're good with direction. They're good with thinking. These are not the ignorant follower. These are very intelligent, very thoughtful people, but they are not, their temperament is such that they're not going to jump into things. Where the sanguine is a conformist for the sake of acceptance. Aha, there's an easy one. There's an easy one. So the sanguine is a conformist for the sake of acceptance. So what would their HAM be? Their happiness attainment motivator, they want acceptance, approbation. Accept me, like me, love me, all the way up to admire me, up to worship me. But it's that accept me is the lower level of the approbation ladder, lower rung, I should say, of the approbation ladder. The equally obedient phlegmatic will be so from a sense of obligation and respect for tradition and the status quo. So what would theirs be? Respect of tradition and status quo, that would be more philosophical, what I call religious or philosophical, that we've got to do what the way things are done. So they're would be more like a religious. So the phlegmatic would be more religious oriented, with a power. I don't want power. The sanguines would be more of a acceptance with power, wanting power. So you can kind of see those if you go through and evaluate them. We'll do that a bit at the end. So I probably shouldn't have bothered right now. Okay, this could be a problem if the status quo is false, because they will not question those in authority. They may privately question the authority, but they're not going to do it out where they would cause any problem. The sanguine temperament is the most common. Today they are prized for their extroverted and seemingly happy-go-lucky approach, but their lack of depth can be a weakness in spirituality. They tend to look at the superficials of Christendom as opposed to in-depth doctrinal changes in their understanding and behaviors. Interestingly, these apparent free spirits often are most obedient in practice because fitting in as part of a group is most important to them. They want to be accepted. I've noticed that in the past with sanguine types. We had one who was big approbation, sanguine temperament, and was a regular attender of church until I taught this. And well, not this particular temperament, but taught from the negatives of it, the faults that are in with approbation, and suddenly quit coming because they were revealed to be an approbation person, and that blew their cover. So, they were a real helper, participant, everything. But when they saw, I'm motivated by approbation, and doesn't have to be a good thing. It can be a bad thing, and usually is, most people. And so they quit coming because they didn't want to hear any more of it. And so I always was sad about that. Women are often sanguine in their nurturing personal natures, usually very warm in their relationships. So that's why sanguine women are attractive and successful as in personal relationships and as a parent. Sanguines need the approval and attention of others. In fact, a spotlight often will suit them just fine. You can put the spotlight on them. They're quite happy with it because they feel that they're getting approval by the fact that they are the center of attention. And they not only enjoy the company and security of a group setting, but seem to derive their energy from such interaction. Their general amiability makes theirs perhaps the most attractive of temperaments, but in a serious situation, it can be enigmatic, might not be the best. The sanguine temperament, obedient and adaptive, though they will seem in religious life, do not base their behavior or their conformity to rules on deep concepts or high ideals. What are they basing it on? Acceptance. They will go along with popular ideas and can appear to those of a more philosophical bent as lacking integrity. They're just doing it to belong. They're very shallow that way. If what is presented as true or desirable in January is totally changed by March, the sanguine will not only parrot the latter views without regard for the apparent contradiction, but will be unlikely to even realize such discrepancies even exist. They're not deep thinkers about things like that. Acceptance comes first, and if they can have acceptance, then they're good. If they're contradictive, well, that's not what you thought 6 months ago. It's not what you said. Well, yeah, I came to figure that out, that it wasn't really true, that this is true. And then 6 more months, something else may be true. They're more involved with acceptance, approbation than they are with real truth. The sanguine is not seeking truth. He is looking for acceptance, and that he is likely to find because even if he becomes involved with a cause or a controversial matter, he will bend with the group's tendencies. At first glance, the sanguine appear to be the most friendly of people, and indeed they are the most at ease in social situations. Nonetheless, they remain blind to the effect their actions or decisions may have on others because they're looking for acceptance, not for truth. Being peripheral in their relationships, they seldom are the ones who can offer strength and support to others. They are unreliable, not through callousness, but because of their lack of depth. They're the kind that superficially support you. I think of the TV show Big Bang Theory. Sheldon, if any of you know the character Sheldon on there, and when he is trying to empathize or support others, he pats them on the shoulder and says, "They're there." That's the level of support that they can bring because they're very superficial. They don't have any real lack of depth and insight in emotional matters, so they don't really see what's going on with the person. They can't offer any instructive insight or deeper support. They just have to be kind of superficial. Now they're there. Everything will be all right. It would be a sanguine sort who would be puzzled by how others could revolt at an injustice. And their response may well be something like, but the rest of the village had to do it too. Everybody else had to do it, so don't worry about it. Now, that would be a typical sanguine kind of response. On the religious side, those of sanguine temperament can have a simple, childlike faith that will appeal to those they serve. They will have gratitude to God for whatever blessings they feel they have received, though they may have a total misunderstanding of the blessings they've received. They may call everything a blessing. Okay. I couldn't find my car keys this morning. God showed me that they were in my pocket. No, everything is, God did this for me. God did this for me. God did this for me. Even things that are just normal, everyday kind of things. But they need that higher power. They need that acceptance. They need that. So they're big about giving God credit for things that are not necessarily God's actions. They are likely to be faithful to any state of life they embrace. And they are likely to have a pleasant home atmosphere and a delight in the simple things of life that can be very positive for others. It's positive, I'm so glad that you have this delight. You like people who are happy about things. They delight in simple things of life. They're always happy and happy-go-lucky, and this is wonderful. That can wear on you, but superficially, until you really get to know their lack of depth, it's pleasing. Melancholy is the perfectionist. We're on to melancholy now, new category, so highlight that. Melancholy is the perfectionist who notices and often dwells on the flaws in things and is very neat and orderly. He tends to be moody and introverted. When he experiences a high, he may be more outgoing or even very creative, but if not, he is usually shy and retiring. He is slow to make friends, but once he makes a friend, he is a faithful one and will do almost anything for his friends or her friends. They only use the masculine in this description. Oops. Let's do this. The melancholic can be described as a temperament that longs for heaven so that life on this earth will always be a disappointment. My little Quaker saying might be appropriate. They say, the melancholic says, "Oh, to dwell up above with those that we love, that will be glory. But to dwell here below with those that we know, that's another story." Always things of the earth are disappointing. They always are looking for that perfect environment, everything to be perfect for them. The depth and dedication of the melancholic will meet or exceed that of the choleric. The depth and dedication of the melancholic will meet or exceed that of the choleric, but his natural caution and slowness to embrace new courses of action can leave him with a sense of having no way to channel his high ideals. They've got great and high ideals, but they're cautious. They don't really want to go into things that are new, so they really don't have ways of expressing those high ideals. The melancholic will base his actions on concepts often so lofty that those of other temperaments will not comprehend the motivation. So that will be kind of the what do they call them? Almost mystic. They'll be looked upon as kind of we don't. You've got this religious thing, but we don't have any idea what it's about. So maybe they're kind of mystical. So if they're, depending on other facets of their personality, they may be looked upon as a real religious saint, but it's not really the case so much, because they often have these lofty concepts and they base their action on them, and they don't really make a lot of sense to us. His relationship with God will appear to have the intensity and devotion of a love affair, but his reactions themselves, not only his ideals, will be of such duration that he will lack resilience when his deep feelings meet with resistance. So if anything starts to block his devotion, his intensity, then he'll have a hard time with that and may go into a shell, or may switch into a more argumentative approach. They're going to have to change in some way. The idealism of the melancholic, so centered in an awareness of divine power, makes him the likely target for the devious. They can be deceived because they have this, if it's godly, it's got to be good. So if I tell that person this is godly, oh, they'll jump on board. Okay, so they are susceptible to being deceived. However great his intelligence, the melancholic can become prey, because if he encounters deceit when he himself is focused on truth and honesty, it will not occur to him that others do not share similar ideals. Now, they don't realize that other people may be not sharing high, lofty religious ideals, but may be deceptive. And you see that a lot in televangelism and that sort of thing, where they get followers because they are deceptive, and they get this type of person who is rather superficial, shallow, not really depth in their religious beliefs. They buy into it. They buy into things easily because they're motivated by, if it's God, it's got to be good. And they don't analyze whether it really is God or not. The melancholic who is devout will be inclined to seek a high degree of virtue, because union with God will be an overwhelming focus, and will indeed be God alone that he seeks to please, or a God-like figure that makes themselves out to be God's representative. Even his frequent devotion to the service of others will be focused on ultimately pleasing the God towards whom his devotion is passionate. So he is sincere in his love for God, and that may make him a sincere human good, or even perhaps divine good performer, but it's not necessarily come from depth. He will naturally assume that all human behavior is based on his own consideration of lofty concepts. In other words, they can be taken, okay? They can be swindled, hustled, because they don't ascribe negative motivations to other people, because they've never thought of that. It's not their way. It may take years for a melancholic to develop any sort of closeness with those he meets, but that done, he will be your most devoted friend or your worst enemy, and either one will be forever. Once harmed personally, exposed to grave injustice, or even seeing that, for example, those in authority have personal gain rather than the welfare of those they rule as their goals, his disillusionment will be strong and usually unshaken. You'll see those if you look on the internet. You'll find former followers of what we would call Christendom charlatans, whose goal now is to unveil their deceit, and they become almost obsessed with telling you how bad that person is. And so they have websites devoted to anti-so-and-so, because they become obsessed because they were so devoted. When they realize the truth, they become the worst enemy. Our profound choleric and melancholic friends, much as their temperaments may be respectively fire and ice, are likely to leave their mark to quite an extraordinary extent when presented with the opportunity. But if the choleric can find his own downfall in anger, the melancholic's Achilles heel is despair. That's where their name comes from, melancholy, despair. Nothing works. I can't get it right. That's when they find that they have believed in falsehood. Their passion has been misdirected. They fall into despair. In planning a meeting, in a planning meeting, he will often see the pitfalls and dangers of any project, and may be a thorn in the side of the achiever who wants to forge ahead. He's the one, the achiever says, okay, we're going to do this project and it's going to go like this. And the melancholic will say, well, now, have you thought about the fact that this could happen? And the achiever, the choleric, is going to say, we don't have to worry about those kind of things. We're just going to go ahead and get it done. Okay? That's the difference. He is usually willing to sacrifice himself for a program or a friend. A good number of the geniuses of this world, architects, artists, world architects, artists, musicians, inventors, philosophers, educators, had a melancholy temperament. Perhaps a better description for the melancholy would be perfectionist. Perfectionist. Okay, so here is a comparison of the temperaments and the MBTI. You see extroversion, introversion, and the MBTI. And the temperament, you see cheerful. And in the phlegmatic, you see perhaps unexcitable. And sensate or intuitive, you see the achiever, the all out, and the intuitive may be the negative. There's some overlap of these, not a great deal, but some. We'll find them later. Here's a review of the MBTI. Extroverts are more influenced by their surroundings and their own intentions. The extrovert is the person who goes by the influence of the external world or other people. Jung also claims that the world in general, particularly America, is extroverted. The introvert doesn't know that he beholds the world from within, so he doesn't really fit. The sensate intuitive, do you like to experience things as they happen? Then you're a sensate. Do you like to pay attention to patterns and how things fit together? You're more intuitive. You want to try to analyze and use your intuition to figure things out, even though intuition is kind of a misnomer for intuitive. Thinking, feeling. Jung claimed that thinking, feeling is another dichotomy to be used in psychological typing. Thinking, roughly speaking, tells you what something is. Feeling tells you whether it's agreeable or not to be either to be accepted or rejected. Do you like to have things logical, black and white, fair and just, straightforward and to the point? Then you are a thinker. Do you like to decide things by your heart? Take people's feelings into consideration. Predict how others would feel about things. Keep harmony and shun conflict. Then you're a feeling type. Had a discussion with a fellow. In fact, I think I may have used this in another example where we were talking about doctrine. And he was a feeling type, not a thinking type. And so when I explained in clear terms the doctrine and where it nullified what he believed, he said, well, I don't know about that, but I know how I feel. I know how I feel about this. So you'll find that when people say things like that. You'll get a good idea about people. They say, I see what you're saying. Okay, that means that they're ruminating it through and thinking it through. They say, I hear what you're feeling, could be on a more superficial level. If they say, I feel you, I feel what you're saying, then they're more of a intuitive type, sensate, feeling type. Okay, so you get a guy kind of get an idea, and of course the whole idea is not to be able to analyze others, but analyze ourselves. When I say when you see someone like that, then we want to say, oh, am I like that? Judging and perceiving. Do you like to have a plan of action, decide things ahead of time, have your mind made up, live by the rules, have things come out so that the good guys win? Then you're a judging type. Or do you like to handle things as they come up? Go with the flow. Have lots of irons in the fire, be exposed to new information, be in the action and not miss anything. Then you're more of a perceiving type. So the question, go back here. So the question is, how do these help you in deciding whether you are having an issue with one of the works of the flesh that we covered? Kind of hard to decipher with these. That's why we're going to use the one I think is best for understanding how we think and behave. The Enneagram will be the one that we'll cover next week. But we're going to try to pull some things together. So I want you to have this basic information, because I'll refer to it again. And so once you have the idea in your head, you have a category in your thinking. Then when we go back and I bring it up as part of what we're seeing in our future studies, you'll be able to relate. Kind of like your diagrams that we have, so you can bring them up now, bring them up later, bring them up again later. You'll be able to process easier. Okay. Now we go for the review of the four temperaments. The choleric is the strongest of the extroverted temperaments. Choleric temperament is type A, the accomplisher, the achiever. It's both good and bad. Choleric will get things done, but on the bad side, doesn't care how he gets them done. Do you have an idea about that person in relationship to, which one do you see for that person? The person that's achiever, doesn't care how he gets things done. Power. It's not what they accomplish, it's that they accomplish. Might want to be something good, might be something bad. So it can't be predominantly religious. It has to be mostly power. The most insensitive of temperaments, the choleric, cares little for the feelings of others. They simply don't play into the equation. Your feelings don't matter. What I want to get done is what matters. In the DISC model, the choleric is D for the driver. They're always driving to get things accomplished, and therefore they can be seen as being difficult. Cholerics have the most trouble with anger. If you don't agree with them, you don't do it their way, then they become angry, intolerant, or impatient. Those of other temperaments are simply tools to be used or problems to be avoided. The choleric doesn't stand on ceremony. They want facts instead of emotions. If you get your feelings hurt, it's your problem, not theirs. He welcomes challenges and even problems to be solved as he pursues his goal single-mindedly. He's not a quitter. He's a natural leader. But he's so focused on his goal, he often rubs people the wrong way, rarely has time to see how they are responding to his pursuit of the goal. Word picture of the phlegmatic includes laid back, easygoing, needing structure, calm, passive, typically an introvert, meaning, of course, that introvert doesn't necessarily mean unsociable. An introvert has an active inner life, can be tired out by large amounts of social interaction. They need quiet and solitude. Introverts are often seen as arrogant or snobbish due to their quiet, introspective natures. This is rarely, if ever, actually true. The DISC model, the phlegmatic, is the S for steady, or structure is their key. They want structure. They appear to the world as calm, easygoing people. As friends, they're fiercely loyal, although they do not usually have a large number of friends. It takes time to get to know them because they're not naturally outgoing. The sanguine is the most common. They're prized for their happy-go-lucky approach, but they have a lack of depth that can be a weakness. Interestingly, these apparent free spirits are often most obedient in practice because fitting in as part of a group is most important to them. Remember, we've already covered which one this fits into. Which one? You can whisper it out. They want to be part of a group. They want what? Approbation. Approbation. Okay. Women are often sanguine in their nurturing personal natures, usually very warm in their relationship. Women want approbation. That's part of their nature. It's part of the way God designed them so that they would be pleasing to the family and be loved, appreciated by the family. So they are more approbation motivated. So they're the helpers, the givers. They give in the relationships. And women are more like that by nature. It's part of the feminine nature as opposed to the male nature that's more taking and driving and trying to dictate how things are. And that's part of the nature God gave him. That's why he said that wives should be subject to their husbands, because the man's nature is to direct, and the woman's nature is to be more loving and generous and kind and lovable. Sanguines need the approval and attention of others. In fact, the spotlight will actually suit them just fine. Not only do they enjoy the company and security of a group setting, but seem to derive their energy from interaction. They thrive on that. They thrive on interaction with others. Their general amiability makes theirs perhaps the most attractive of temperaments. Everybody loves a sanguine, okay? But in a serious situation, it can be a problem. The sanguine temperament, obedient and adaptable, though they will seem in religious life, do not base their behavior or their conformity to rules on deep concepts or high ideals. They will go along with popular ideals, can appear to those of a more philosophical bent as lacking integrity. If what is presented as true or desirable in January is totally changed by March, the sanguine will not only parrot the most recent views without regard for the apparent contradiction, but will likely not even realize that there is a discrepancy, because they accept it because that's how the group feels. They're a very group-oriented person. The sanguine is not seeking truth. He's looking for acceptance. And he finds it because he becomes involved with a cause or a controversial issue. He will bend to the group's tendencies. At first glance, the sanguine appear to be the most friendly of people, and indeed, they are the most at ease in social situations. Nonetheless, they remain blind to the effect their actions or decisions may have on others. They don't see the ramifications. Melancholy is the perfectionist who notices and often dwells on the flaws in things. They often then are in despair over how things are going, how things are going to turn out. They're very neat and orderly, but they tend to be moody and introverted. When he experiences a high, he may be more outgoing or even very creative, but if not, he just kind of shrinks back away because he's not the motivator in the issue. He's not the leader, so he'll slink back and let other people lead and motivate. He's slow to make friends, but once he makes a friend, he will do almost anything for that friend. The melancholic who is devout will be inclined to seek a high degree of virtue, because union with God will be an overwhelming focus, and it will indeed be God alone that he seeks to please. So he won't care about your feelings if he thinks that your feelings are in the way of him pleasing God. Okay? Even his frequent devotion to the service of others will be focused ultimately on pleasing God, toward whom his devotion is passionate. He will naturally assume that all human behavior is based on his own consideration of lofty concepts. That's how he can be snared into giving to a cause that is corrupt. So if you have a cause that people are taking the money for themselves, not going to see that, because he could never imagine anybody not doing this good cause for the right reasons. In a planning meeting, he'll see the pitfalls and dangers. Might be a thorn in the side of the achiever, but he is willing to sacrifice himself for a program or a friend. A great number of the geniuses of this world, artists, musicians, inventors, philosophers, educators, had a melancholy temperament. They're deeply analytical. The best description for the melancholic would be the perfectionist. And we'll use that term when we get to see the person who is the perfectionist in the Enneagrams method. Okay? All right. Well, I did good. I got the 50 minutes down pat, both of them. Okay, this is the kind of subject that you'll have to watch and review, and take a single page of notes out of all of our notes and out of the presentation, because to try to put everything, just try to grab a few highlights of each of the temperaments, each of the types, and put them together, analyze them in relationship to the hams. Okay? You really have to start visualizing the hams when you see how different approaches to life work, because a person who is sensate wants to feel things. So what are they going to be? Chemical. They're going to be chemical, because it's the endorphins and the enkephalins in the brain that make them happy. So they're chemical, and they're going to be feeling oriented, okay? Because it makes them feel good. And religious, those who just want to be right. Those that just want to be right. You saw those. You see the approbation people. You see materialism. We didn't see a lot of that, but drivers can be that way. Power, we saw that. Sex, we didn't really see that. We'll bring those out more in our future studies, but we'll see them all. Okay, let's pray, and then we'll close for questions. Father, we are grateful for the opportunity to see these things. We ask, of course, that even though we have studied man's viewpoint, that you give us spiritual insight as we look at these, that we'll recall doctrine, that we'll recall scripture as we look at these things, as we review them, as we take our notes on the presentations, so that we will see things from a more spiritual perspective and not from human viewpoint. We ask your blessing on what we studied in Jesus' name. Amen.